The first muscle that we look at in the anterior compartment of the arm is the biceps brachii. So this muscle has two heads to it. We have a long head and a short head, and the long and the short is in reference to the length of the tendon. So we have, let me hide some of these muscles here. This head here, going to the coracoid process, is the short head. It sits more medial. And we have the long head that goes up and over the head of the humerus and attaches on the supraglenoid tubercle of the arm, of the scapula. And it has a common insertion point on the radial tuberosity. And the function of the biceps brachii, since one head does cross over the shoulder joint, it can cause flexion of the shoulder, and obviously it will cause flexion of the forearm at the elbow joint. So if you remember, supination is when you bring your palms facing forward. So again, the biceps brachii assists with the supination of the forearm. The next muscle of this group sits deep to the biceps brachii, and it is the coracobrachialis. And we already saw this one when we looked at adductors of the arm. And the name of the coracobrachialis tells you its attachments. So its origin will be on the coracoid process, and its insertion will just be on the shaft of the humerus. So the coracobrachialis is also a flexor of the shoulder. And so question number 3 is, what 3 muscles have an attachment at the coracoid process? So one of the heads of the biceps brachii has an attachment there. You can see this head right here. The second muscle is the one we just talked about. And then the third muscle is this one right here. And you're not required to know the origin and insertion of this muscle in your white sheets, but I want you to tell me the name of this muscle. So these are the 3 muscles that have an attachment at the coracoid process. The next muscle of the arm is the brachialis. And again, orienting you, there's the coracobrachialis. This is the brachialis. So the brachialis has its origin on the distal anterior surface of the humerus. And then it crosses the elbow joint and has its insertion on the coronoid process of the ulna. So if you remember where that coronoid process was down here in the ulna. And since it does cross the elbow joint, it does cause flexion of the forearm at the elbow joint. So if we look at the anterior forearm with all of its muscles, you can see this is the biceps brachii, and then you can see the brachialis peeking out from underneath, more on the lateral side than the medial side. But someone who's very developed and has low body fat, you would be able to see these distinct muscle separations. And then the last muscle of the arm actually starts up in the arm and then ends up down here in the forearm. And it is called the brachioradialis. So the brachioradialis has its origin up here on the humerus, on the lateral distal part of the humerus. And if we follow it down, you can see that its insertion is down here on the styloid process of the radius. So you can remember that this end of the radius forms this little point, and that is where the brachioradialis inserts. So the muscle starts up here in the brachial region and then ends down here on the radial side of the antebrachial region. So that's where it gets its name of brachioradialis. We're going to look at this muscle again when we do the forearms because it's a very important anchor point for the forearm muscles. Its action is to flex the forearm at the elbow joint. So it does not cross the wrist joint, so it can't flex the wrist, but it can flex the elbow. So it'll bring the forearm in a flexed position.